innocent men, women, and children, since the introduction of Christianity, have been burnt, tortured, fined, imprisoned. Yet have we not advanced 1 inch towards uniformity. What has been the effect of coercion? To make one half the world fools and the other half hypocrites, to support roguery and error all over the earth. That's Thomas Jefferson, writing in his Notes on Virginia in 1781, and this is This Week in Atheist History. I'm John Rafferty, president of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and also an active and proud member of New York City Atheists, which is producing this show. Each week, we look at singular events in history that have to do with atheism, agnosticism, free thinking, secularism, humanism, rationalism, skepticism, whatever you have, and we discuss or celebrate the births or sometimes even the deaths of well-known and some not so well-known atheists and other free thinkers throughout the ages, and or significant dates that have to do with the beginnings or the end of wars, court dates, burnings at the stake, the usual fun and games of religion throughout the years. We're in the second week in April, and we celebrate first Thomas Jefferson, my own particular hero, and he was born on April 13th in 1743. He was a very young member of the Continental Congress, and was drafted by that Congress to draft the Declaration of Independence, which led us away from our relationship with Great Britain and King George. He became governor of Virginia in 1779, and was one of the leading politicians, as governor, of course, to disestablish the Anglican Church as the state religion of Virginia. He wrote the Statute of Religious Freedom for Virginia, whose preamble indicted state religion, noting that, quote, false religions over the greatest part of the world and through all time have been maintained through the church state to compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves is sinful and tyrannical. The heart of the statute that Jefferson wrote guarantees that no citizen, quote, shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever. It was adopted in Jefferson's statute was adopted in 1786 and is replicated in most United States state constitutions, with the exception of some Bible Belt states which have sneaked in references to, our Heavenly Father or Jesus our Savior, but thank goodness we don't live there. Jefferson spent 5 years as the ambassador, our ambassador to France, and therefore was out of the country at the time of the adoption of the U.S. Constitution. But when he came back, he was one of the strongest advocates for adding a Bill of Rights, and most notably that First Amendment, those 43 marvelous words that guarantee us that we will never become a religious state. He was the first Secretary of State under the new Constitution in 1789. He became the Vice President under Adams in 1796, and then he defeated Adams in 1800 and became the third President of the United States and was reelected in 1804. the right-wing rewriters of American history who contend that deists like Washington and Madison were really Christians, that outright unbelievers like Ben Franklin were really Christians, and that even Thomas Jefferson, who fought against religious oppression his entire life, was really a believing Christian when it comes right down to it. And they ignore the facts, many facts, including one that where Jefferson wrote, "The day will come when the mystical generation of Jesus, by the Supreme Being as his Father, in the womb of a virgin, will be classed with the fable of the generation of Minerva in the brain of Jupiter." Jefferson was contemptuous, basically, of all Christian doctrine. And one of the things he did for his own intellectual amusement, I don't know, but certainly to satisfy his own intellectual curiosity, was he went through the New Testament with a scissors or a razor blade, and he extracted the teachings of Jesus from the New Testament. He left out all the miracles. He left out the death and supposed death and resurrection. He left out the miracle of the virgin birth. All that nonsense was left out, and he looked at Jesus as a teacher. And he wound up with a 46-page book of the teachings of Jesus. By the way, he did not publish this in his lifetime, but he left copies with friends, and he described the teachings of Jesus in a letter to a friend as in taking the things like the Sermon on the Mount. He called that the matter which is evidently his, meaning Jesus's, and which is as easily distinguishable as diamonds from a dunghill. New Testament dunghill, teachings of Jesus, diamonds. One of the craziest, some of the craziest nonsense of the religious right that I have ever come across is the fact that they have argued that Jefferson really was a believing Christian because he even published his own Bible, the Jefferson Bible. Of course, what they're referring to is his teachings of Jesus, which dismissed all the miracles, all the basis of Christianity, and treated Jesus like a teacher, like the Buddha or any other religious leader who taught human compassion and love of fellow man. One of Jefferson's lasting legacies was encompassed in a ensconced, or whatever, in a letter to the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut, that he wrote on January 1st, 1802. Man worked every day of the year, including New Year's Day. He is explaining, he was a president at the time. He was explaining that the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment builds what he called a wall of separation between church and state. That's where we get the phrase from Thomas Jefferson. And he, of course, what had happened was the Baptists in Connecticut were trying to establish their own church, and they were being put upon by the Congregationalists who ran things in Connecticut and insisted that the Baptists still pay tithes to the Thomas Jefferson. And he, of course, what had happened was the Baptists in Connecticut were trying to establish their own church, and they were being put upon by the Congregationalists who ran things in Connecticut and insisted that the Baptists still pay tithes to the Congregationalist church, because that is, after all, the state church. And so they were looking for freedom for their own church, the Baptists. And of course what they were really looking for was the opportunity to become equal opportunity oppressors of their own. They wanted to establish their church in their part of Connecticut. So Jefferson's letter to them was not what they were hoping for. They talked about religious freedom, but what they really wanted was to be religious oppressors. However, Jefferson's letter on the separation of church and state, the wall of separation, has been quoted in many, many Supreme Court decisions, and it's become part of the lexicon of American democracy. While he was president, Jefferson refused to issue any days of prayer or thanksgiving. I wish that our current president and some of his immediate predecessors would have followed his example. He believed that civil powers only were conferred on public officials, and because he felt public officials should have nothing to do with religious practices. He died in 1826, and on his tombstone he had carved, author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia. All of these free thought documents were what he wanted to be remembered for. As he wrote in a letter to his nephew way back in 1787, instructing the young man on how to live his life, he said, "Question with boldness even the existence of a God, because if there be one, he must more approve of the homage of reason than of blindfolded fear. Do not be frightened from this inquiry by any fear of its consequences. If it ends in a belief that there is no God, you will find inducements to virtue in the comforts and pleasantness you feel in its exercise, and the love of others which it will procure for you." Thomas Jefferson, born April 13th in 1743. Free thinker, probably an atheist. Christopher Hitchens, who was born April 13th, 1949. Just a kid. Writer and columnist. He was born in England, attended Cambridge, and graduated from Oxford, reading in philosophy, politics, and economics. He was a book reviewer for the Times. He emigrated to the United States, has written for The Nation, Slate, The Daily Mirror, The Atlantic Monthly, and Vanity Fair. Also writes for Harper's and many other U.S. newspapers and journals. You almost can't pick up a publication in America today without seeing Christopher Hitchens' name. But, not but at all, Christopher Hitchens is an atheist and has said so straight out. He has written a bunch of books, but is best known in free thought circles for authoring The Missionary Position, which was an expose of Mother Teresa. I've gotten in trouble for quoting Hitchens on this before, but I'm going to do it again. He called her a fascist Albanian dwarf, and I go along with him. The dwarf part is a little bit nasty, but fascist, certainly. His expose of Mother Teresa really propelled him into fame or notoriety in America. He is no knee-jerk liberal. He was decidedly anti-Clinton, pro-Iraq war, and so he's been very controversial. In Papal Power, published in Slate and Slate.com in April of 2005, Hitchens pointed out that the Pope, quote, was a part of the cover-up and obstruction of justice that allowed the child rape scandal to continue for so long, unquote. You know, and most Catholics all around the world said, you know, if only the Pope had known, just as the Russian peasants 200 years of Mother Teresa. I've gotten in trouble for quoting Hitchens on this before, but I'm going to do it again. He called her a fascist Albanian dwarf, and I go along with him. The dwarf part is a little bit nasty, but fashion, certainly. His expose of Mother Teresa really propelled him into fame or notoriety in America. He is no knee-jerk liberal. He was decidedly anti-Clinton, pro-Iraq war, and so he's been very controversial. In Papal Power, published in Slate and Slate.com in April of 2005, Hitchens pointed out that the Pope, quote, was a part of the cover-up and obstruction of justice that allowed the child rape scandal to continue for so long, unquote. You know, and most Catholics all around the world said, you know, if only the Pope had known, just as the Russian peasants 200 years ago said, if only the Tsar knew. The same thing with Catholics all around the world. This would never have gone on if only the dear Father in Rome knew. And Hitchens exposed the fact that the Vatican knew. That was in 2005. Since then, Hitchens has hit the bestseller list with his the publication a couple of years ago of his book, God is Not Great. He took the rallying cry of the Islamic fundamentalists, Allahu Akbar, God is great, and turned it into the title of his book. But he did not write an anti-Muslim book. He wrote an anti-religion book, which takes to task every religion in the world as nonsense. And he brought in this book, which I highly recommend to any of you who have not read it, which takes to task all the religions in the world which are based on nonsense. And he means not just the myths that go back to the Stone Age, you know, about blue-skinned gods with 4 arms, or dead carpenters who come back to life, or any of the rest of it, but on the very principles of the church. And this is what made God is Not Great such an important book of the last few years. It's because it ignored all the nonsense myths. Anybody with a brain knows that those things don't mean anything. Hitchens attacked the very philosophical underpinnings of religion, and I'm not going to try to explain the book here. By the way, that's been done very, very well on the Atheist Book Club, and I hope some of you have seen that. But at any rate, God is Not Great. I recommend it to you very highly. Hitchens summarized his philosophy in Harper's Magazine way back in 1982 when he wrote, "Gullibility and credulity are considered undesirable qualities in every department of human life except religion. Why are we praised by godly men for surrendering our godly gift of reason when we cross their mental thresholds? Atheism strikes me as morally superior, as well as intellectually superior, to religion, since it is obviously inconceivable that all religions can be right. The most reasonable conclusion is that they are all wrong." Unquote. I agree.
You get down on your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect, and genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. Do whatever steps you want if you have cleared them with the pontiff. Everybody say his own Kyrie eleison, doing the Vatican right. Get in line in that that processional, step into that small confessional. There the guy who's got religion'll tell you if your sin's original. If it is, try playing it safer. Drink the wine and chew the wafer. 2, 4, 6, 8. Time to transubstantiate. So get down upon your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect, and genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. Make a cross on your abdomen. When in Rome, do like a Roman. Ave Maria, gee, it's good to see you. Getting ecstatic and sort of dramatic and doing the Vatican rag.
Esoteric songwriter was born. He earned a degree in math from Harvard and a master's the following year. He recorded The Songs of Tom Lehrer in 1953, followed by An Evening Wasted with Tom Lehrer, and he was never happy performing on stage, and he stopped doing it. He was pretty well known for NBC's That Was the Week That Was in the 1960s, and he was never a hugely popular entertainer or songwriter in America because the targets of his lyrics and his satiric poetry were always the churches, the government, the corporations, the people who run our lives, and so he was considered vaguely subversive, maybe not even so vaguely, but some of his stuff is witty beyond belief. And one of his most famous quips is that political satire became obsolete when Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, quote unquote. I love that one. An atheist, you bet. And a funny one. Another songwriter, which you might never associate with atheism or free thought, is E.Y. Yip Harburg. Born April 8th in 1896. He was exceptionally successful writing for Broadway and for the movies, and and one of the most famous movies ever. He was called Broadway Social Conscience, and he began writing lyrics for Broadway revues in the 1930s, including the classic anthem of the Depression, "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" He also wrote April in Paris. How about that one? With Vernon Duke. He mostly wrote for book musicals with political and social themes, including Hooray for What in 1937 with an anti-war theme, and Bloomer Girl in 1944 with a feminist theme and anti-racist. He co-wrote the book and wrote the lyrics for Finian's Rainbow, and he called himself a rebel by birth. The House of God never had much appeal for me. Anyhow, I found the substitute temple, the theater. But what is he best known for? His most famous Hollywood work was in The Wizard of Oz, with his Academy Award-winning song, Over the Rainbow. From 1951 to 1961, he was blacklisted by the House Un-American Activities Committee investigations and the McCarthy hearings, and those kept him from working on film and television and radio, but Broadway is a different ball of wax entirely, and he was able to keep working on Broadway. One of my favorite songs is Groucho Marx's signature song from At the Circus in 1939, Lydia the Tattooed Lady. I love her, and I love the lyrics. Next time you watch the Marx Brothers on your Netflix rental of At the Circus, listen to the lyrics. They're hilarious. Rhymes for the Irreverent is his volume of light verse, followed up by more rhymes for the irreverent, and a couple of little samples of Yip Harburg's work. One, just a 4-line poem called Do Unto Others. Love thy neighbor as thyself? Hide that motto on the shelf. Let it lie there, keep it idle, especially if you're suicidal. And realist. For what we are about to receive, O Lord, 'tis thee we thank, said the cannibal as he cut a slice of the missionary's shank. Both of those are from Rhymes for the Irreverent. Yip Harburg. Somewhere over the rainbow, brother, can you spare a dime? And a free thinker, an atheist, and a terrifically funny punster.
Once where we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation, and a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers.